I was in a medically induced coma for about 3.5 weeks. I was experiencing kind of this, dismemberment. Yes, I felt like my body was being ripped apart. I was being tortured by these doctors, which on one level, they were trying to save my life, but that's how my body interpreted the experience. They had to open me up, close me up multiple times. When you're lucid dreaming, it is an incredible experience. Things are felt very intensely. The colors are very vibrant. It's a very real experience.
It seems like so many people are so certain about this, that, and the other. I'm like, what do you know? I believe what I want to believe, and vice versa. I think it's like a very thin veil, and I could totally, why not? Why can't things cross over? Kristen, thank you. Kristen, thank you so much for being here. And I'm sorry for mistaking Tucson with Phoenix off the bat.
That's okay.
There's one specific thing I listened to when I was listening to a clip. It's I don't want to say it's cliche, but it just hit me when you said this experience that you had, this near-death experience, brought awareness to death. And I'm sure you've said that multiple times, but that one kind of, triggered me, if you will, in a good way. What did you mean by this near-death that you had gave you awareness to death outside of the obvious?
Yeah, that is a really, I guess, kind of multi-layered question and answer, I suppose. And so, obviously I was very close to death when I had my illness and near-death experience. So I did not technically, clinically die. So some people might say, well, you didn't have a near-death experience, but I was in a medically induced coma for about 3.5 weeks. And while I was in that state, I had 3 big dreams, I call them, although they felt like very real experiences to me and real places. And particularly the last dream felt like I was living out a whole other lifetime. And when I came back to this body, this experience in time, it's as if I was changed by those experiences and, memories, if you call it that. And so, death, I was just reading over one of my presentations at IANS, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing because this is such a taboo topic in our culture currently. But traditionally, many cultures all over the world, especially, indigenous cultures, had some kind of form of shamanism or some kind of, rituals or rites, kind of mimicking the near-death experience or attempting to communicate with the other world, whatever, label you want to put on that. So for myself, having, a very profound experience, waking up from being in a coma, not really knowing, what happened, where I was, it took me quite a bit of time. And then I, once I awoke from that coma, there was no guarantee that I was going to survive. So I had what's called flesh-eating bacteria or necrotizing fasciitis in my throat and chest. So it was a very, very severe life-threatening infection, and oftentimes they may have to amputate limbs when this infection spreads because it's so aggressive. And so this was in my throat and chest. And after waking, the doctor said, you really only had maybe like a 1% chance of surviving this. So my family really had to undergo, just an incredible emotional roller coaster of day to day, not knowing, whether I was going to make it well. Today she's, her organs haven't failed. She doesn't appear to be brain dead, et cetera. So we'll keep trying. But even when I awoke, I had, to learn how to breathe again. My lungs were severely scarred and I would oftentimes stop breathing, in my sleep. I was still intubated when I woke on the coma. from the coma. Then I had a heart attack. But when I awoke, I had this incredible will to live. And prior to my illness, I was going through a really hard time in my life. I was in my early 20s, and like, a lot of young people in their 20s, it's about finding yourself, kind of feeling lost, also trying to, learn how to survive and get approval from society. And so I really was putting, my health at risk by, trying to sacrifice too much of my health and who I was to survive. And so following this experience, I still had some, depression, of course, but it really became like this incredible gift, an opportunity to live moment by moment, with that awareness of death. And not only coming back from this other realm, this, other experience, but also, learning how to let go of my old self. I was down to like 80 some pounds. I couldn't eat food for many months. I couldn't walk on my own. I couldn't go to the bathroom on my own. So it really was this like regression to, kind of like an infant state where you're really dependent on others for help. And, another part of the Western kind of, I would say overall values is independence, so that was something I had worked very hard to be self-sufficient, independent. And here I am, having to really be humbled and get help with everything. And so that was, very profound for me, that, these strangers were willing to help me, care for me, love me through this process of, that was very painful and disorienting. And I had to learn to let go. This was really, the gift, and something I try to use in my life currently. That ability to put in the work, try to heal or focus on a vision of what you want, to see in your life, but also learning to let go of those expectations and, just kind of embrace moment to moment. There's I'm thinking of a wonderful book by Krishnamurti, philosopher, and David Bohm. It's called The Ending of Time. And in this book, they talk about the concept of thought, ego, memory, and this ability to really, kind of die to each moment, which may sound like an awful or scary thing. But for myself, I think it really means, embracing the unknown, embracing the mystery of life. And when we, are so lost in projections and, ego and our sense of identity, we, and worry, which, most of us are, and a lot of the structures and systems in our society support that kind of thinking, we miss out on so much. And, so this experience, I lost a lot, I guess, like physically, emotionally. I definitely had some lingering trauma. But I really became a new person, through this experience. And a lot of people who have near-death experiences, but also experience intensely traumatic experiences. They're, of course, it's a very painful, awful thing to go through at the time. But sometimes, not always, looking back, one might look back and think, wow, that really gave me this inner strength, or it increased my ability to have empathy or caring, increased a sense of depth. And from this experience, I, was very, I was very much more in touch with my kind of right brain side. So my intuition was increased, my sense of empathy And I also began to have very profound lucid dreams, precognitive dreams, which I still, track and explore. So it's really shifted my whole value system. And while I still struggle to live in this world, make money, all that stuff, I really try to reflect daily on, my thoughts, my words, my actions, and my own death, really, which is a beautiful thing. Thinking about my relationships, the legacy. Is this something, I want to worry about and put energy into, or, how do I want to show up in this moment? So it can become a very spiritually profound and beautiful thing to begin to really reflect upon not only one's death, but, loved ones. We really live in denial of that in our society. And I think that causes us to really take things for granted.
For exclusive access to bonus content, new episodes, and more, check out our Patreon account for only $5 a month. Link is in the description.
I think when people hear, when I've heard near-death experiences, a lot of the focus is the actual experience when, in your case, in a coma, or when people, quote unquote, die. And it's that experience, but let alone, even if you separate that spiritual experience or whatever you want to call it or identify it as, you still nearly died, you and these people that have had the experience. So even just a less woo-woo type discussion of the experience, that's got to shift you in some way for better or for worse. So that experience in itself, being so close to death, regardless of what happened when you were under, is so impactful and clearly has shaped your life. But I'm curious as well, is what do you recall when you were under, when you were in this coma and when you had this experience, what happened there?
And I think this can be really helpful for people who have loved ones who are either, in a coma, experiencing dementia or other states where it feels like you can't reach that person. I think I very much knew what was happening to me, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so these 3 dreams, the first one almost reminds me of stories you hear of kind of shamanic initiation. And I'm not, saying I'm a shaman or comparing myself to that at all. But I was experiencing kind of this, dismemberment. I felt like I felt like my body was being ripped apart. I was being tortured by these doctors, which, on one level, they were trying to save my life, but that's how my body interpreted the experience. They had to open me up, close me up multiple times. I had a wound vac in my chest. There was so many surgeries I went through. And so even though I wasn't awake and consciously aware, my body, my dream life was interpreting that information. And so it was I experienced, some level of pain in these first stages of dreams. And then the second dream I remember, which felt like an eternity, was almost like a kind of, I don't want to necessarily use religious terms, but it reminds me of when people talk about purgatory or the bardos. It was this waiting area where I was in this underground cave or cavern floating on water and surrounded by these beautiful, almost like Chinese lanterns floating in the water with me. And I can still, recall the feeling, the music I heard, the images just floating in this space. And there was no pain, but I was just waiting. And I knew that reality was just slightly off, that this wasn't normal, like waking reality. But I was in this place for what felt like a very, very long time. And so then the other dream I really remember, again, felt like I lived years in this body or this life. And I'm open to other interpretations. I don't want to, pin this down into, this is a past life, or maybe this is another life, or someone else's consciousness. I'm open to different interpretations. But for me, the important thing to consider is just how impactful it was for me. And so in this experience, I'm an Asian woman in my 40s, and I'm in this state of just incredible depression, and I feel hopeless. I have incredible, self-loathing and just pain, emotional pain, because I am trapped on this huge wooden ship in the middle of the ocean. And my job is to bring these young women on and train them to basically be sex slaves, which is an awful thing. And we weren't allowed to look at each other, talk to one another. We were, basically, slaves, objects, having no agency of our own. And I knew I was supposed to live, I would live my entire life out this way. And it was a horrible, incredibly painful existence. And there was this moment, incredible moment in this experience where this woman stands in front of me, and there's no words exchanged, but just simply her eyes lock eyes with mine. And there's this compassion, overwhelming compassion, and knowing of my pain. And it was like this spell was broken. And this woman felt like my sister. And we began, making plans to liberate ourselves and liberate the other women on the ship. And we became successful in doing this. And the tone in the dream really began to change, where it felt like, again, I was trapped. There was no way out. And then this very much felt like a turning point for me and in my recovery from this illness. Now, an interesting piece of information is, of course, my family was there visiting me and, encouraging me. And later I was told that there would be moments where I would spontaneously awaken out of the coma. And several times I did lock eyes with my sister and was crying and tearful. And she was also tearful. And so I wonder if somehow, this may have influenced the dream or kind of gotten through to my subconscious and encouraged me to come back to this body, this reality. And here I am today. But for me, it's also been a dream that's been really important in the work I do in terms of counseling and helping women recover from traumatic experiences such as assaults and, help with self-esteem, as well as change some of the dynamics in our culture. So it was profound. And then in addition to that, I became very active in pursuing, the spiritual path. So, yeah.
So with that experience, because, you're specifying and, titling that it was a dream, but I personally, I don't hear too many stories about having certain dreams, at least in the normal day-to-day life of not suffering, almost dying, that have that kind of impact on someone's life. So do you believe it was, something else tapping into that past life? Like you didn't exactly put the nail on it, but is that what you believe it was?
Okay. I'm glad you asked this question. Thank you for asking this question.
You're welcome. I'm so prepared.
And, I think it's so important for people to listen to their dreams. And in traditional cultures, the waking life and dream life was not so separated. When we talk about dreams, visions, fantasy experiences, daydreaming, we tend to think of, that has no value. But Jungian psychology, and this was a big part of my healing too, is, going to grad school at Pacifica and studying Jungian psychology, they really lean into the value and power in dreams, images, active imagination. And I think dreams can be precognitive. I've documented, I can't even tell you how many dreams that I will dream something and then it will happen exactly as I dreamed it, either literally or symbolically. I've also had shared dreaming experiences, shared crossing experiences where a friend was passing away and I was with her through that experience. Prior to my illness, I had a dream that I was being, strangled. And this is where the infection started 6 months prior that I believe was foreshadowing my illness. So I think it's so important to take dreams more seriously. And indigenous cultures and many, ancient cultures, they use dreams, to survive, as a tribe or, as a warning of, things that possibilities of what could happen. So I do think Jung coins the term, collective unconscious, this kind of, it's complicated to describe, but, this idea that human beings are connected through some kind of, field of thought or archetypes or symbols. And maybe even animals and different species have this as well. But this idea that we are able to access information from this field, we are able to have, inner knowings, precognition, synchronicities, all of these to me experiences really indicate there's something else going on here and that we don't completely understand time in the way that we operate and use it currently. There's some amazing researchers now, really being taken seriously, doing scientific studies and, documenting these experiences. And my hope is we can begin to really tap into these experiences in a very empowered way, rather than have these experiences pathologized or, being labeled as crazy, because that's not possible. And that's been done, in the past. So my hope is that this change in paradigm really is beginning to happen. And, science and psychology is starting to finally recognize and legitimize these experiences.
Yeah. And with the dream as well, at the end of the day, it impacted your life. I think that's the main
Absolutely.
point. Regardless what's interpreted, what's real, what's not, I think it's real enough because it impacted your life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes these dreams are so crazy that it feels real, but then there's certain levels to that. So it is curious to be thinking, was that just simply a dream, or was that a deeper dream, or was it something else? Was it a past life, or did you just literally just dream something that was pulled from your subconscious? So in regards to taking both sides of it, of trying to think of it as, more relating to just a dream, was there any correlation to any life experiences that you tried relating to the experience that you had as the Asian woman? Like, have you had or been around sexual trauma in your life where you can correlate that, or was it completely off the board and have no correlation?
Well, I'll just, self-disclose. I've had sexual trauma, I think, like many, many women. And I think it's important that women, begin to really speak up and talk about these experiences so that, we can help heal and solve this problem that's epidemic and rampant. And I do tend to be, I guess I have had a real interest in Asian philosophy and spirituality, as well as in indigenous spirituality and philosophy, but also, just looking at, the world we live in currently. We do have a system of I'm just going to be blunt and honest from my own perspective, of global exploitation and slavery, where a lot of, East Asian peoples, especially women, don't have many rights. They work long hours. There's the human trafficking of women and children. That's one of the top third grossing industries globally. So this is a huge problem that's just not, really being addressed. And it's happening, in the US, it's happening all over. I live in Tucson, Arizona, and I live very close to the border. And we're seeing drastic, increase in women and children migrants, escaping violence in their country. And I know it's not, black and white issue, but there's real human suffering. And oftentimes it is, brown or black women and children that are being exploited the most, that have less agency. So there still is so much that I think, as a society and culture, we can do to begin to heal. And not to mention the, genocide in this country that was committed against the indigenous peoples, and still in ways in which they're being discriminated against. I mean, the Navajo Nation, which is one of the largest reservations in Arizona, they don't have clean water. They don't have access to water. Mm. And there's definitely two sets of kind of, laws and rules in this country. And so I try to do as much as I can as one single person, helping people one-on-one, but also, trying to share my story to help inspire others, hopefully, that it is possible to overcome trauma and heal, but also to try to empower others, to speak up. And I think, I'm a Jungian psychotherapist. So Jung is all about, he believes that the path to wholeness and individuation is to examine what's in the shadow, examine those darker parts of human nature. Because if we don't, if we deny the parts of ourselves that we repress, so like, fear, insecurity, anger, all these things that are normal human emotions, we tend to, push down or deny because we want to present ourselves as a certain way or with a certain image. And when we do that, we tend to split off and project either on other people around us or groups of people. But when we can sit with those feelings, when we can acknowledge those, darker parts of ourselves or past deeds that maybe weren't so great, we have this ability to expand our love and compassion for others and to look at, these split off, how should I say, disowned parts of ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's funny because I was clearing out some books that I got, and I forget the name of the Jungian, but I think it's Man and His Symbols. Is that?
Oh, yes.
So I actually I read that book a while back, and I feel like I need to reread it because there's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of stuff in there that I feel like I have to read it a couple of times to really absorb it all. It's a lot of information. But it's ironic that, we're talking about that. I just happened to just stare at that book yesterday and was thinking I literally have to reread that book because I think the idea of the shadow is important, especially when it comes to grief or dealing with trauma. That gets highlighted, I think, and you see a different part of you that may have these bad thoughts and may think in a way that you're not normally thinking. Or even if you haven't gone through trauma, we're human. I think it's natural to have these dark thoughts, if anything, or have that shadow version of us, or not be perfect and take actions we're not proud of, X, Y, Z. But in facing that, it's as if you confront it and it has a different perspective. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror and really seeing what's on your face, as opposed to just looking the other way, avoid your shadow, avoid your darkness, and not ever get a true idea of what that is. And then once you face it, it kind of dissipates in some weird way. So I think that's part of the healing process for anything you go through, let alone almost dying or losing someone. And so in regards to, you had a 1% chance of living and you survived. What was that transitionary period? Because I recently had a conversation about how, if you lose someone, how the ripple effect of grief, let alone, almost dying and almost losing a loved one, what is that relationship dynamic of the people that almost lost you?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, and it's so hard in this culture because most companies provide 3 days off if you lose a loved one. So there's this pressure to really get back to work, don't think about it too much, just keep pushing forward. And so, for myself, it was really a challenge, and I was coping with, these dreams, a changed sense of identity. I was only in my 20s. So it was very hard for me to kind of relate to my peers in the same way. So I became, very immersed and kind of searching spiritually. And it did definitely change my relationship, with my family. I try to be more vocal and expressive, about what I'm feeling. I try to express love more. I try to really live with that awareness that, we're all not going to live forever. And although with any family, of course, there's different dynamics and it can be a challenge. But I really feel that my sense of openness to others has expanded. And I've just been so lucky to have, not only a deep relationship with my family, but with, all these mentors, teachers, friends, and my clients. I've really learned so much from the people I work with. It is such an honor to listen and to hear people's stories, and especially when it comes to, grief and loss. There needs to be more spaces where people can process, where they can, talk about these things and not feel like they're alienated or excluded or kind of shamed for feeling grief. I think that really happens. And especially, with men in our culture, men are still conditioned, although it's getting better, to, be strong, not show vulnerability or those emotions. And that's so unfair and harmful for people who are grieving. So reevaluating our attitudes towards grief and loss, some of these gender roles as well. And then I forgot the last part of your question, but I just think it's so important. And listening, just the power of listening, being heard, validated. It's so healing. It really is.
Yeah. This podcast is big about, sharing people's stories and getting it out. But a lot of the time, I'm just like, this world is so absurd. It's so ridiculous that I just throw my arms up and say, okay, I don't know. This is ridiculous. What the hell is going on? I look up, I see the stars, how big the universe is, and I'm like, what? And yet we're trying to make sense of what we see right in front of us. And I said in one of my skits recently, as ridiculous as this might sound, it's like, you ever see a platypus? Platypus is a weird looking. So it's like the little things in life. It's like, I can't explain anything, even when I think I can. And I think you just got to throw our arms up. And to me, sometimes got to laugh through this life and not take it too seriously, even though it is feeling very serious. I just think, with stories like yours of nearly dying, surviving, trying to find yourself, and all the pain that goes on through the world, it's like, this is it. This is where we are, and it is harder for some people, and that's the crazy part. That how it's the hardest thing you ever gone through is the hardest thing you ever gone through. So it's relative. One person, it's hard to gauge the difficulties of life, even though on paper, this person, that person had a much more difficult life. But then just the way people process certain information based on how they were raised or XYZ out of their, control. It's like, how do you even gauge difficulty in many ways, even though on paper it shows that? So I think a lot of the things you said make sense. You just got to show compassion, be there for each other. And to me, laugh our way through life, because this is all absurd. It's a ridiculous theatrical show.
I love that. And that's so true. I mean, sometimes life is just so, absurd, or it just feels like, there's this sense of humor or this story unfolding that is so unbelievable, that it's that whole saying, like, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. I mean, and these are such intense times, interesting, absurd, and especially with, the algorithms kind of working on people's emotions. And now AI is going to be, affecting us more
AI
and
is
more.
A whole other one.
Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of challenges, coming up. but I really believe in the power of, human connection. And I really do. And that, this realm, this reality may not be the only realm of reality there is. I look at life as kind of, this is a learning experience. And it's not necessarily supposed to be, pleasurable or easy all the time. And that's not to say, don't enjoy life. But I mean, when I have some of these dream experiences that I've had for myself, and I know there's other indigenous cultures that kind of echo this theme, it feels as though this other reality is sometimes more real, to this realm, because, the colors are so vibrant, the emotion is so intense, and it's just incredible. Whereas in this reality, I mean, especially, I think as a result of this scientific materialist worldview where we view matter as dead parts or particles, that creates this dynamic where it's okay to exploit. It's okay to, examine scientifically, maybe in a way that's harmful. And other cultures, had this idea of animism, where the life is just imbued, or matter is imbued with this sense of life. And there's this element of reciprocity and relationship. And I really think we could benefit from bringing some of those beliefs and ideas back into just day-to-day living.
What did you mean about the vibrancy and the colors? Because based on the 3 dreams, I don't remember you mentioning anything about understanding the other side at all. I thought it was more dream oriented.
Sure. So I am very diligent with recording my dreams, and in these dream experiences, it was incredibly, real. I mean,
so the experience itself felt more vibrant, and wherever you were, it felt different.
Felt different. And with many of the dreams that I still have, when I don't know if you've experienced lucid dreaming, but when you're lucid dreaming, it is an incredible experience. Things are felt very intensely. The colors are very vibrant. It's a very real experience. And, sometimes I wonder about, if there's interaction between this other realm and this realm, if it's just related. And with quantum theory, string theory, I mean, who knows? I just think it's important to consider these experiences rather than just kind of brushing them off because they don't fit in with the current theory, maybe taking it as evidence and expanding our theory.
I agree. I think, and especially science by definition, it's ever evolving. We find one thing out, then we can keep finding more. It's like never, from what it seems, it's very rarely like, okay, this is it. Then we just keep finding more. Obviously, there's laws here and there that's different, but in regards to questions like this, it seems like so many people are so certain about this, that, and the other. I'm like, what do you know? We don't some crazy shit out there. We're just going to say, oh, this doesn't exist. That's not real. It's like, I think I believe what I want to believe and vice versa. I think it's like a very thin veil. And I could totally, why not? Why can't things cross over? So to kind of reel it in, there's one thing I wanted to ask you. So you had 1% chance of living. And then you said you came out of that with a thrive to survive. What is it that keeps you wanting to live?
Oh my gosh. Wow. What is it that Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, no pressure. We're not live right now. We don't have a live audience. It's all good.
Yeah, I really, for myself, I'm really rejuvenated from nature. I think there's something about, being in nature that gets us to kind of connect more deeply with our right brain, with, it allows us to expand into this otherness, whereas when we're kind of working in our day-to-day, man-made reality, our lifestyle, there's these rigid boundaries, time boundaries with other people, whereas, really connecting with nature can just open your perspective and allow one to really sink into this state of timelessness or where sometimes people talk about that state of flow. So nature, creativity, there's so many things I want to do. I have this documentary I'm trying to get out this year about the nature of time, healing, and synchronicity, and
Very cool.
connecting with people. I get to witness these incredible, healing journeys of people. It's been such an honor. So I really feel protected in my role. I know there's so much suffering and difficulty out there, but I feel like that helps me really connecting with others. And as odd as it may sound, again, reflecting on my own mortality and death, and trying to really come back to why I'm here, how I want to live my life and what's important to me. And so it's hard sometimes to kind of prioritize and be true to those values, but that I think really keeps me going. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I think we're here to just experience it all. And I feel like if we see it as life as a lens of just experience and lessons, it's like we're tapping into a video game, and let's just focus on that. We're going to experience shit. Might suck. A lot of it sucks, but so be it. But I want to thank you so much for sharing this. This is very cool. I don't know what it all means, but clearly it meant something to you, and that's all that matters. And it changed your life for the better. And hopefully you continue, and you will continue to, impact other people's lives and contribute to this world that we're in. Hopefully make it a little better of a place one by one. So thank you for sharing this. And if there's anything else you want to say as we tap out of here, you can just say goodbye. You can say whatever you want, but I want to thank you again.
Okay. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you inviting me on your podcast, and I thank everyone who's listening. And I guess just kind of my last words would be, no matter what kind of pain or suffering you're feeling, there are people who care out there, and the power of connection, real, authentic, vulnerable connection can be so healing and transforming. I think we live in this world where many people feel more and more isolated. Ironically, even though we have all this technology and ways to communicate. And so, just the power of finding, maybe finding people who are also going through the same struggles, and knowing that there is help out there.
I love that. Thank you for those words. Yeah, it's crazy. There's more people than ever in this world, and it's the easiest time to connect with people, yet everyone feels so alone. So I think there's a negligence of face-to-face. I don't care what happens to AI, that face-to-face is it's a different breed, and we're missing that. So everyone, thank you again for listening to this episode. I'll share some of her links and any information she wants to give us in the show notes below. Feel free to go check her out. And as usual, leave me a good review. Leave a good review if you like this episode, or me or her, whatever. Just give me a good review so I can get this podcast out there. Thank you, love. And we'll stay in touch. And until next time, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.